Hi, Richard Tubb here, and today I want to talk about a really mature technology that I'm starting to see emerging into the managed service provider space, and that technology is load balancing. So we're going to discuss what load balancing is and why it's becoming a popular source of new revenue for MSPs with two men who know the subject inside and out. So I'm joined today by the Cloud and Service Provider Manager at Kemp Technologies, Tim Swainson, and Kemp Pre-Sales Engineer and the man with the coolest name in the channel, the one and the only Sid Bloodsaw. Sid,
thank you very much.
And Tim, welcome. How you both doing?
Thank you. I'm good, thank you.
Cool. So Kemp are a really well-established company, but may not be a name that's familiar to everybody within the managed service provider space. So Tim, if I turn to you first of all, who are Kemp and what do you do?
Yeah, good way of sort of highlighting the challenges that we have with getting people aware of what we are and how it is we provide what we do, because we have been in the industry for a good number of years. 2004 was when the first deployments of our products were put into the market, but the business was founded several years before that, really to give companies the ability to take the tools that they need to deliver applications in the way that they are to be expected. We all like applications, so we all use applications. We might not actually like the applications we have to use, but we all have to use them on a day-to-day basis.
Yep.
The challenge with that is when we click or try and do something with an application, there's so many factors that can affect it. So what Kemp aims to deliver is the tool set that you're going to need to make sure that those applications, when they're requested, are delivered in the time and the manner and following the security procedures that are needed for each user and each individual. So that's what we do. Kemp as a business been around, as I mentioned, since the early 2000s, and we simplify the process in ensuring your application experience utilizing tools such as load balancers.
So load balancing, when I mention the word to most MSPs, they immediately jump to, internet broadband. Yeah, we make sure that, that it's going. Clearly, it's much more than that. How do you refer to sort of load balancing as a technology within Kemp?
Yeah, it is the first area that most people are aware of is load balancing or taking multiple lines from an internet provider and delivering more throughput, as it were.
Yeah.
And then making sure that those connections have the load shared across them. Now that's a very basic form of load balancing, and that can be done with a number of simple rules, usually via a switch or a firewall. But when it comes then to the actual application aware load balancing, and also then the server and the infrastructure load balancing, we need a lot more rules and a lot more capability to be able to deliver that. And that's where a dedicated load balancing solution such as Kemp comes into place. Because we take that load balancing capability that we offer and combine with that a number of tools that make life easy with those applications that you're trying to use, that's where we show a massive difference in the ability that we have when it comes to the type of load balancing that we refer to.
Got it. And Kemp came onto my radar probably around 12 months ago when I started to see some of what I consider the more progressive MSPs in the market, starting to drop the name into conversation, which has led up to the conversation we're having today. Sid, if I turn to you,
yeah.
Most MSPs that you as a sales engineer, you work with MSPs all the time. Most MSPs that I speak to about load balancers, they just say, we're vaguely aware of what it is, but we don't actually use it. So perhaps could you give some practical examples of how you see MSPs using load balancing?
Yeah, sure. So as Tim was mentioning, it's all about making sure that the application is available at all times. An MSP is going to have multiple customers. So you can use a load balancer and you can segment that load balancer to say customer A can use this service, customer B can have their set of services, and etc. And what Kemp allow you to do is to allow you to have a per client load balancer within our central platform that you can split them out. Also, another practicality is you don't want a single point of failure. A lot of MSPs will have SLAs for all their customers because also that's how they're going to make their money to a degree anyway. So with a load balancer in place, if you're saying I need to have the services available 99.9% of the time, a load balancer is going to help aid to that. It's only going to help drive business more for the MSPs. Another use case would be, let's say that one of the customers have a surge in business and business is going great for them, but now they don't have enough capacity in order to get the applications to the stage where their business is growing. The load balancer will help the customer grow and scale while keeping it within healthy boundaries so that there's not going to be any performance dips.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. And Tim, I'm going to turn to you just to talk about some of the commercials of this, because MSPs love new technologies. They love technologies that can increase their revenue and reduce their costs. But the first thing that I know a lot of MSPs are going to do is going to say, okay, I like this. Aren't there free or open source load balancers that I can use? So how do you answer that question? You must get that a lot.
So we do get that a lot. So there's a lot of different ways in which you can access a load balancing solution from the different providers that you're working with. We also have native load balancing. That's another area that we get questioned about. But if we were to look at the open source and the free load balancers, they are available and they have their place. They really do. Kemp even offer a free load balancer for service providers to take and use as you see fit. But there are going to be several restrictions within those type of licenses. For example, excuse me, the sort of platforms in which they will support will be limited. So it might be that your dev team has taken on board an open source platform and they've built that into their environment to be able to use the capabilities of that load balancer. But then when it needs to be moved into a live environment or into the cloud environment in which it's to end up being positioned within, you will start to find that there are certain limitations within that open source or free to use load balancing tool. So we do get presented with those sort of challenges, and that's often where we get invited to show companies how our tools can actually be utilized across all those different environments. There's a lot of research that we've got available that we can share with people, videos from influencers that we deal with, similar to yourself, that can show people how, when they're looking at building these tools, they'll have a start point, they'll have a middle point, but then when it comes to deployment to the open world, will the tools that they've used all along the way meet their requirements? So these tools are there, they have a reason for being there, but are they going to be the tools that you then use in your live environment? If they're not, does that really justify good use of time and the free version?
Got it. There's usually a cost associated with free, isn't there? Yeah.
There is.
And actually, Sid, if I can turn to you. So I'm up here in Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of the country. A few weeks ago, I was at the Amazon Web Services user group, which is hosted just down the road from the northeast. And I heard people talking about load balancing and the native load balancers in things like AWS and Azure and things like that. So similar sort of question as the one to Tim. How does Kemp work alongside those native load balancers? Does it replace them? What does the scenario look like?
So when we're looking at it from a cloud architecture point of view, we have to bear in mind that we always need a native load balancer to take all the incoming traffic coming in. And then what will happen from there is it will then decide which of the load balancers it will send the traffic to. However, it does come with limitations. If an MSP is saying, I'm going to provide my customers with a hybrid solution, what you don't want is you don't want to have two different solutions trying to do the same thing.
Sure.
So Amazon and Azure, they're great at what they do. They have some limitations from their load balancing perspective. For example, with both of them, you'd need 3 virtual machines in order to spin up a load balancing solution, a complete one, just one unit. So you're looking at the global traffic manager to load balance across different zones. Looking at layer 4 and layer 7 load balancing, the different ways in which we do load balancing. But with Kemp solution, you'll need one machine to do all 3 of those functions. So you're saving money already. With Azure as an example, the layer 4 load balancing is free. It's very basic rudimentary load balancing. Layer 7 and the global traffic manager costs more. But with our load balancing, we price in such a way that you get all those features bundled in one, depending on the support tier you get. But the biggest one, I would say, for all MSPs listening to this is that if you're looking for a hybrid solution, you don't have any cloud lock-in, because the Azure load balancer won't load balance any stuff that's happening in AWS and vice versa. But Kemp are available in both clouds, plus on-premise. So we can stitch all 3 of them together, giving you more flexibility in where you want to put different workloads and which cloud you want to put them in.
Oh, very cool. I want to come back to that sort of mixed environment as well.
Okay.
But Tim, let's put you on the spot here for a moment to do with the commercial. So I can,
Mm.
when I'm doing these type of interviews, I always like to put myself in the MSP shoes. I used to be an MSP myself. And so one of the first questions is going to be, so how do you price this stuff? And specifically, you know, there's lots of vendors out there who provide solutions that are licensed in a traditional way. So it'd be per box or, you know, per site and things like that. Do Kemp do things in an MSP way? You know, do you allow sort of flexible licensing?
We certainly do, yes, and that's one of the key advantages we've got within the discussions we have when we start talking to service providers about the way in which this is going to be built into their costs. So what we aim to deliver with the license types that we provide is removing the need for an upfront cost. So what we want to be able to offer to our service providers is take our product, deploy it, use it, and then we'll look back at the month that's gone by and see how you've consumed our licenses. So we offer two approaches. We've got a supplier agreement, and that's really for a service provider to take our license and build it as needed into the deployments, into this the infrastructure that they're supporting. And they can build that as they require it. The challenge that most people have had over the years is they've looked at load balancing and they've seen this huge upfront appliance and a huge upfront cost. Justifying that into a service has had some difficulties. So the fact that they can take it in the small increments that they're going to need, you deploy it, use it, they build for what they've used, but then have the ability to flex that license as well. So we don't tie you into a long-winded agreement with this. We're looking at 30-day agreements with access to our licenses as well. So you deploy the licenses you need, you use them. If they're too big or too small, you then alter them. And again, we look back at the month that's gone by and you get billed for your usage within Splar. The other option is a metered license. You take an agreed amount of throughput, you deploy that as many times as you like with our virtual instances across all of your platforms. That can go into cloud, it can go into your local data center, it can go into your local infrastructure. Wherever it needs to be deployed, you spin up a license and you deploy it, and all of that then consolidates back in to that pot of throughput that you've agreed you're going to use. Gives you that flexibility to use, deploy, and be charged for what you've accessed.
Absolutely. Sid, give me some examples, some practical real-world examples. You work with MSPs day in and day out. What are MSPs using this technology to do?
Yeah, so I would say some applications that MSPs would be using our load balancers for. I'll use the typical ones. People are still on premise, so Exchange, Skype for Business, SharePoint in some instances, their own commercial, like their own bespoke applications as well. There are multitudes of them out there. They could be doing a VDI solution for a customer as well. So they'll be using a VDI platform like Horizon View, for example. All those are just different ways that they can use our load balancer. And as Tim mentioned, give them that flexibility and that support that they require for it. At the end of the day, the last thing you want is, or for your customers, is them ringing you up saying, I can't access any of my stuff. I could 10 minutes ago because there's something you didn't look into.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier on, just to elaborate on it a bit. So I was working with an MSP based in the Northwest recently, and they've got a multi-platform environment. So they've got a mixture of cloud and on-premise. So you said you can deliver across both. What does that look like in the real world?
So what that would look like is that you would have a pair of load balancers in either cloud, or if they have their own cloud, we can just simply give them their own version of a load balancer for them to use. You would spin up some on-premise, and then what you would use for us is you would use a feature called global balancing. What you simply do from there is just say, I want to put it in this site, and this site, and this one, tie them all together and saying, okay, if one of them fails, fail over to another one. Therefore, you're always giving access to a particular service that you're trying to require for your customer. What I would say to that is, obviously, you need to make sure all of your applications are replicated on all of them anyway, so you're not sending someone somewhere which they can't access anything, you know. But it is as simple as that. The testing of it, the longest part is really just explaining what it is versus actually doing it. And that's a great thing, because when I evangelize about Kemp, I evangelize how easy it is to use. I mean, I can set up a load balancer within 10 minutes and get everything from literally downloading it on our website to getting it installed. It can be actually quicker than that if you slow your finger down on how many times you want to click the mouse button. But the premise of it, Kemp is supposed to be easy for anyone to use. And as Tim mentioned, as you mentioned earlier, people talk about, oh, we're too small. But a hedge fund, for example, would only have 10 people. But the hedge fund would be controlling lots of stuff in the background. So we'll never use the user size as a prerequisite to go in. And as Tim mentioned, what is your mission critical application? If that thing goes down, somebody's getting fired. And that's as simple as that. If you boil it down that way, everyone's going to say, I have an answer to that. It's this, this, and this. Fine. You need a load balancer.
Got it. Tim, what other examples do you see, practical real world? We've just talked about like a hedge fund, a small number of people. When you're speaking to MSPs, what are they, what are the applications they're looking to keep up and running?
The applications, again, they differ depending on the audience that you're speaking to, but we've always seen a lot of success within the Microsoft environments. Sid mentioned a couple there that we've seen great success within the past, the likes of Exchange and Skype. Those sort of business critical applications that are required have always had an easy justification as to why something like a load balancer should be deployed. But then when we start looking at the other applications that people are using on the day-to-day usage that people have, the office applications that they're using, but then also maybe some bespoke applications. We're also being involved a lot more now with object storage, where people are looking at their capabilities of their backup and their recovery procedures that they're following. So we've now got the ability to talk to people about their S3 requirements within their storage applications and solutions that they're using, and how are they being transferred so that object storage is accessible. We then start looking at how those applications are deployed maybe in a disaster recovery scenario, and all these are back to the services that the service provider have either built or they're in place to maintain for them. We have a lot of examples within e-commerce sites as well. Some of our testimonials that we've got on our website refer to the cases we've got around where e-commerce sites, again, minutes of downtime for them is unacceptable because of the cost. We also reference some of the sites that don't have shops for you to walk into. So if your only location was to purchase something through a website and that website was not accessible, hey, we all know that's going to cost.
Yep.
So the different services that we get involved in and the different common use cases, we tend to see the real use cases being down to that critical application. We like to be tested. If you've got an application that's a little bit off, not so much off the shelf, and it's being bespokely built, hey, build us into how that application is being delivered. The templates that we've got written for a lot of the vendors' solutions that already exist are freely accessible to anybody using our platforms as well. And as Sid rightly mentioned, when it comes to deploying those templates, I've seen it in action. When Sid says 10 minutes, I've seen it happen. That's never great for a service when you've charged a day, but but to simplify the rest of the deployment that's taking place, and to deploy a technology that is as complicated as load balancing is into something as straightforward as Kemp make it is where we see the advantages. So the applications that we support are varied. We make sure that the documentation and the templates for those applications is available. We've got some brilliant examples within the world of education as well, with a lot of the applications they might be using with these smart boards and Moodle and all these different applications that education deployments would involve. So yeah, there's a good mixture, and we do also like to be challenged. So
you might regret saying that, Tim, because we're going to give your details out later on. So that is an open challenge to listeners, I think. So we've got this far into chatting without mentioning the words that's on everybody's lips at the moment, and that's security and cybersecurity specifically. So what about cybersecurity? So every MSP that I speak to is focusing on security now. It's a massive growth area. Clients are waking up to the fact that You know, the criminals don't target just enterprises. The criminals could not care less whether you're a big business, small business. If you've got money, they're gonna go for you. Sid, you've got a background as an ethical hacker, haven't you? So how do you help with application protection from attacks of that nature?
So that's actually a good question. So as you said, customers are waking up to hacks that are happening all the time. One of the biggest ones I remember so far was WannaCry and the variations off of that, ransomware and botnet attacks and things of all natures. What Kemp can do to help with security, we're not a security company. First of all, I need to stress that up front. What we do is we do load balancing with an element of security. So we have a security add-on as such. Now, what we can do to help people is that people will normally MSPs will have a firewall already. And what we'll do with our load balancer is that we can complement that firewall using what is called a web application firewall. So that is where our security play now comes in. However, given our size, what we've done is that we've partnered with one of the best providers for rules in the business, which is TrustWave. TrustWave will send out yearly reports and quarterly reports and so on, talking about what's happening in the space. And we work with them as well as we work with Mod Security, and we look to create our own web application firewall. And the premise of that simply is if a hacker is trying to come in, is going to have to now go past a firewall, which can be done if you know what you're doing, and then I need to go past a web application firewall. And as you mentioned, I was an ethical hacker. One of the things I would do is I'm going to sniff the network, is what the terminology is called. And if I see an alert that says no web application firewall present, I'm happy, because now that means someone left the door open with the key still there. It's easy for me to get in. With a web application firewall there, it's like having two doors bolted one after the other. So it's harder to get in. But with Kemp's, that security play that we have, we can help protect against certain types of DDoS attacks, which for people who aren't that well versed in security, DDoS attacks is the first thing they'll think of. Websites going down, as Tim mentioned, if you're a retail e-commerce store, you get DDoSed. Your website's down, no one can access it, your money is going out the drain.
So DDoS, distributed denial of service attacks,
correct.
So flooding the site to stop it responding to legitimate users.
Exactly, and that's one of the things that everyone wants to protect against, because that's the last thing you want for both being the business or the person trying to access it in. But there are other things as well. So our Layer 7 firewall allows you to also protect against application-specific attacks, because anything that has a user-centric, human-centric point of view is liable to be hit the hardest. So I'll give you an example. Within Exchange, we have the Outlook web access. So it's the part where you go in and access your emails online. If you're not using the actual client, you can use the web browser version. There are vulnerabilities within that. Now, Microsoft themselves will release patches on it, but sometimes there are patches that won't be released because no one spotted this certain thing happening. So what TrustWave would do, as they're in the business of catching all this, they will send out a vulnerability mitigation. We get that downloaded from our load balancers, and we get to then push them out to people who've allowed for the automatic update rules on application firewall, for example. That's giving you a 0-day protection, because the 0-day threats are the biggest things that will hit people, because no one's got a patch for it yet. And the last thing you want is, you don't want to have something that's being unruly, destroying everything around you, and you have no way of containing it. So that's just one of the things that, from our side as a load balancing company, we can help with the security play. But we always go back to the point of, we aren't a security company. We don't pretend to be one, because that's a whole different kettle of fish. But we do have ways that we can play into it, which can help.
Yeah. Tim, I'll go back to you. You know, I mentioned that Kemp sort of came on my radar about 12 months ago. The reason for this conversation is because I was surprised by the variety of applications, you know, that you're in. Load balancing to me was one thing. I sort of pigeonholed it, but there's clearly that, you know, there's a whole raft of things here. What type of MSPs are you finding are being attracted to working with them? Is there a mindset of those MSPs? Not a size or anything, but a mindset.
Yeah, we do find that the security mindset is helping a lot, playing into the sort of environments that would benefit from a load balancer. But the mindset of the sort of companies that are taking our product are the ones that own the service, really do own that full service that they're delivering. If it is that you're utilizing somebody else's services, you might be restricted as to the type of involvement or type of applications or services you can then build into. But if you fully own that service, you've got your own hosting, or you've got applications that you are then hosting for businesses on your infrastructure, or infrastructure that you then control. Those are the ideal type of partner for us, because it's their responsibility. If that application doesn't perform, it's because there's something wrong with the infrastructure that they are responsible for managing. So that's where we see most of our success is with partners that are providing that full service. The other ones are those that are offering those disaster recovery solutions that we mentioned earlier. But again, they're providing the solution to build that service. So if it is that they're implementing the vendor's solution that provides the object storage or supports the S3 workloads that integrates with AWS, if they are building that scenario for their customer, it's those type of service providers that would then see the need, because they're building these platforms. They will see the need for the Kemp solution a lot quicker than other types of providers would do. The security, it is a big play for us, and we do get asked a lot of questions around it, but as Sid rightly says, that's not our key focus. Our key focus is the load balancing of infrastructure. It then gets a little confusing though, because when we start talking to service providers about how we can support the security deployments that they've got. So when we look at SSL offloading or authentication, we can integrate with authentication providers. So these multi-factor tools that you might be using, we can support those with our product as well, making sure they're working in the way they should be, and also become that gateway for those tools to be used. So the sort of partners that we work with successfully are the ones that take that full ownership and that full responsibility for delivering that service. And then also, if it's their responsibility, if it doesn't work, they use our tools to make sure they're getting the service levels met that they require, and then also using the other service tools that we can then help them integrate with our platform as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I'm a geek, I love tech and love these things. Sid, do you think we would be able to get a demo of what it looks like? Could you do a screen share with us and show us what's what?
Yeah, sure thing. Let me just get that up and running for you.
There we go.
Oh, you should be able to see my load balancer.
Looks good.
Okay, so this is what you'll see when you come into the load balancer. I'll just do a quick whistle-stop tour of what's around. So first things first is you will see that you can have an HA pair. Now, this is our high available pair. We always stress that you want to have this because you don't want a single point of failure anywhere. Last thing you want is to have a load balancer, and for some reason it had to restart or something, and you don't want a single point of failure. So that's assuring us that if this were to fail, the other unit would take over pretty quickly. Okay. But the main thing I really want to show you is Kemp 360 Central. Now, for an MSP, they would have multiple screens showing multiple systems doing their thing. This would just be another addition to that. So what you can see here is you can see that we have, you can see that which load balancers are available. So pretty nice traffic system here. So we have 10 load balancers are available, but 3 aren't. How many have been activated via Central itself, as Tim was mentioning. If customers are using perpetual licenses, they can be brought into our Central platform, and then they can show you when they need to expire for those who are taking renewals. And things such as how many logs have been generated and what are those logs, and who are the ones are they going to be reported to? How are my applications doing? How are my the servers that the applications live on doing? How many have I turned off? If I'm using the web application firewall, I want to know how many alerts or events have happened in the last hour or 24 hours, and how many connections are currently running through all of my load balancers right now. Okay. Now, a really cool thing that we do is, I mentioned before, we had the whole multi-tenancy approach. So if I'm presenting this to you as an MSP, I'm saying to you, you have customer A, customer B, customer C. You can modify who can see what and who can do what. So you're given that flexibility if you want them to have any access at all. Another part is the people who are in customer A cannot see what's in customer B and C, because you will disallow any access from them. So you have that privacy in mind. And from here, traffic light system, you can see what's doing what. If you want to get a bit more graphical and a bit more geeky like myself, you can then look at all these different charts and you can see what's happening in the last hour and drill it back to what's happening years ago, okay, as this loads up and does that. Now, within this, you have all of the applications that are being load balanced. And what you can do, let's say that a customer had a new pair of load balancers that they wanted to spin up and move an application to. What we can do is something that we call VS Motion Migrate. Now, what that implies is we're taking a application config that we've built up to be load balanced, and we're saying, I want to now deploy this somewhere else. Once we select where we want to deploy it, we give an IP address, give it a port, and then we enable it on the target. Now, if you think of it this way, a use case for this could be if someone's going from on-premise to the cloud, a private cloud or a public cloud. You can actually spin up load balancers there, have them waiting and everything else ready, and then say, I want to move this application from this point to this point. Done. Or if you simply just want to copy them across, you can do. So you have even more options, which as an MSP, that's another service you can now deliver to your customers and have another tier revenue. So we can even provide you with this and go, you can now, you have one thing for you to do, but we can split it into 5. And those 5 things now you can now separate out and charge as a service. So now we're providing you more value that you wouldn't have thought of by giving us a invite to come and see you, for example. We can also function within Central as a repository. So Tim mentioned earlier that we have documentation. And one thing I wanted to show is the fact that we have documentation like our templates here. So any MSP can go onto our website and download these for free, as Tim mentioned. There's a deployment guide on the side that also looks at the same thing. It just pretty much has a word for word of what we're doing here. Okay. So with that in mind, now I can say I have a global repository for all my system logs for my separate team to look at, or a separate person to look at all my logs and push them to a different place to view logs, for example, such as SolarWinds or Alien Vault or anywhere else, any other tool that people are using. You can take our firmware and you can now say, I can select the firmware, install it onto Central, and then tell Central, I want to push this to all of my customers in a staggered approach. You can schedule when you want your backups to be done, and also when you want your firmware to be pushed out. And as I said, with the templates, you can download our templates, upload them here, and then from there, push them out as well. You can do basic configuration on Central, but you would normally go to the load balancer itself and actually do the rest of it. This is where the magic actually happens. But one other thing I want to do, just to round this part off, is not only can we load balance and monitor our load balances anywhere, as he said, there is something more that we can do. If you don't mind reading out the different names, what you can see here. So we can load balance our loadmaster, our loadmaster HA pair, but we have some other parties that are interested in there as well.
Got it. Very cool.
So Nginx, who are now part of F5, HA Proxy, so that's an open source load balancer, going back to the point that you and Tim was mentioning earlier. AWS, we can load balance that. F5, our #1 competitor. The main draw for this, I would say, for any MSP is that if they have customers have any of these, you can take a 30-day trial of our appliance with our load balancer, put all that together, and then let me show you what else is going to happen. That's going to blow your mind. So let me go here to repository. Let's go to here, setting configurations. Let me go to reporting. So with the report, what you can do, let's see if this will work. If it doesn't, then I'll explain what happens. All right, while it's downloading. So the whole premise of this, here we go. The whole premise of this is that we can show you the throughput and the different figures of what's happening with the load balancer in a given period of time. That can then be sent to the different parties within the business who need to know, okay, this is how much our SLAs have been met. We can see that via this, and you can drill down and get more into detail with it. With that, we also color code them as well. So if you have third-party load balancers in here, and you're using this as a ploy to then replace that third party with Kemp, you now have an actual graphical view. This is how much throughput they've been using versus this is how much we're using, and the cost differential between us is massive.
Got it.
If you're trying to reduce costs and drive revenue, and this is effectively a liability instead of an asset, then now we need to have different talks on, okay, now we need to migrate over, and we can even migrate over from a let's say, for example, F5's virtual services onto a Kemp load balancers one with Central. So there's so much more we can do here. There's so many different ways how an MSP can build more services just from this one platform. I already listed about 2, but you can do 6. And if you can, and as an MSP, if you can charge for an additional 6 services, depending on how you want to structure your model, as you, Tim, mentioned earlier, you get more bang for your buck than you ever would have thought possible by having Kemp in the picture.
Very cool. Very cool indeed. Thanks for showing us around that. It's good to get a look at that. Gents, I'm very conscious of your time. This has been an exciting conversation though, because this is a technology that I don't see that many MSPs using, and yet I hope at the end of our conversation it's clear to anybody who's listening that there is a wealth of opportunities in here for all type of businesses, whatever size you are. Tim, any thoughts on anybody who's watching this and perhaps they want to get in touch and find out a little bit more or have a conversation with you and Sid about how it might be applicable to their business? How can they get in touch with you and have that chat?
Yeah, we can definitely have those conversations with anybody that's seen something here that they might already be using. We've referred to a couple of other vendors there, the open source solutions. How are they using those at the moment? Can we help them with the management of those through a tool that you would use to then manage the Kemp solutions? There's many discussions that we'd like to have. You can take a look at our website, which is kemp.ax. The application experience is the reason we've selected AX, which is usually the question that people ask us. So Kemp.ax is a starting point for you to take a look at further details about what we offer, and then also our contact details we're more than happy to provide. Reach us by phone, get us on a webinar similar to what we've done today. We're more than happy, both myself and Sid, to demonstrate how our tools can be used.
Fantastic. I'll include all the details of everything that we've talked about, including your contact details in the show notes for this as well. But thank you both. That was really interesting to look into there. It's a topic that for the longest time I've thought needs to have a light shined on it in the MSP industry. I think there's a ton of opportunity here for progressive MSPs. So thank you for helping me explore that. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for yours.
No problem, man. No
Cool. Thanks both. And that's all for today. I hope you've enjoyed this. All the show notes are going to be included, and I'd encourage you to reach out to Tim and the man with the coolest name in the channel, Sid Bloodsaw. That's all for now. Thanks, guys.